All right. Well, Bridget, thanks for coming on. I wanted to first say this is episode 4, so we've had a couple under our belt at this point. But it's been a unique conversation every time. But I really appreciate you coming on. Why don't you introduce yourself really quickly, just at a high level, and then we'll dive deep into you and Netcove and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Stephen. Nice to be on. I'm honored to be number 4, one of the first handful of episodes. So that's awesome. I'm Bridget Wilson. I am the SVP Governance, Risk, and Compliance at Network Coverage. We're an MSP. We're an MSSP. We are a CMMC RPO. We are many things, and I can safely say I've dabbled in all of those things. So I have a background in IT and cybersecurity, incident response, and managed security deliverables. I have been working also with DoD subcontractors for a solid number of years here. So I've got some skin in the game in terms of the CMMC program, and most recently pivoted over in 2024 to solely focusing on compliance and building out regulatory framework implementation practices.
So when you say implementation projects and practices, you're talking about with like customers who have nothing or are trying to learn what to do, and you kind of hold their hand and walk alongside them, kind of thing?
Absolutely. Yeah. The SMB up through enterprise, we have nothing in place. And we found out, we had to do this thing to, we have this in place and we need somebody to run the program because it makes more sense for us to outsource that expertise sort of deal. So
the all too common mantra, and it's not to be negative towards, these OSCs and stuff. It's more of you're not alone in, if you feel like you're coming to a service provider after hearing that you need to do something about this thing, and then feeling like you've not done anything, and you're not alone. It's a common thing.
Yeah, I always look at it as, people come and they're stressed because they haven't done what they need to do yet. It's like, look, you're having the conversation. That is the best place to start, and you'll be in good hands, and let's go and let's build it. But it's like having the conversation is the first piece.
Yeah, I would say in the last year or two, especially since the proposed rule, the conversations have ramped up exponentially. So I'm pretty comfortable or confident that there are a lot more companies going to MSPs and going to people like us, our company, starting to get the wheels turning than there ever has been before. I mean, you see as of the final rule actually being finalized earlier in December, people actually already in line getting assessed, see-through POs.
Oh yes,
it's happening, sweetheart.
Yeah. Okay. So we're good with these like December surprises, right? Like that's been the theme. The big surprise was not that the ruling was finalized. We knew that was going to happen December 16th. But hey, guess what? January 2nd, C3PAOs can commence level 2 assessments. And what that meant, obviously for anybody who had booked preemptively said level 2 assessment, it was almost like a Christmas Eve surprise. Like, here's your evidence request list, guys. So we are seeing it. It's happening. It's happening now, which is incredible.
And it's really encouraging to see, like, all over LinkedIn, how many people and how many companies are feeling confident that they're actually already ready to be assessed. Like, they're on the books, they're on the schedule with C3PAOs. And yeah, I think things are working out better than many in the industry thought they were. But also, obviously, there's still a lot to be seen, right? There's still a lot of time to pass before, the 48 CFR is done. There's just still a lot. So I'm trying to maintain confidence. Things are looking good. We have a lot of business and a lot of people coming to us for help I'm assuming the same with you. You guys have probably seen an uptick in the CMMC side of consulting, because I know that that's, as an MSP, that's not the only thing you guys do. I was looking at your website earlier today, which I guess should guide us into some of these questions that I have for you. I was looking at your website earlier today, and I saw you guys do things like AI as a service, and you guys do a bunch of different things
Oh
related
yeah.
to service practitioning. So yeah, let's before we get into Netcove and everything that Netcove does, I want the world to know Bridget. So let's back up a little bit. If you're okay with it,
Yeah.
would you mind going back to your where you grew up, how you grew up, what things led into your adult life that kind of guided you and positioned you into becoming the person you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if the world is ready for Bridget, but we're gonna spill it.
We're ready.
Um, so I mean, as with most people of my generation, let's call it millennials, right? Like we didn't necessarily have a cybersecurity path back then when we were going through school, college education, et cetera. So most of us kind of like roundabout landed there unexpectedly, and I'm certainly not an exception to that. I grew up in Mass, born and raised. I lived in Massachusetts both most of my life. I moved out west for a little short span. Was living in Arizona. I went to school at U of A, which was awesome. I ended up. This is totally random, but my major ended up being audio engineering.
Oh, wow.
So I was sort of in the. I started out. My path was fine in performing arts. Um, which is so random now, talking about what I do, completely disconnect there.
Really
But I
wild.
landed in recording arts, and I landed back here in Mass, going to school in Boston, which is where I ended up getting my degree in recording. And out of that, I landed at a software company in Cambridge. We made digital audio recording equipment and some professional recording software. So I was doing customer support, working in Cambridge, living the dream. I I ended up coming out of that just due to commute inability to relocate, and landed back at my bartending gig, where I had been for many, many years through college, which was super comfortable for me. But out of that is sort of where I fell into IT, I guess you would say. I was telling somebody this story the other day. A couple of my regulars at the bar came in every day, and I knew them really well, and they were saying something one day about their beer had kind of like a funky taste. So
Nice.
they had brought it to like a few other people at the restaurant, a few other bartenders, and like nobody could figure out what was going on. So I was like, oh yeah, it's probably this, this, and this. Let me just go check. And within like 20 minutes, I was like, hey, taste this. It was something to do with like the detergents and the washer and the tap and a combination of
Boy.
things. And they were like, oh, you just did some serious troubleshooting. And I was like, yeah, that was kind of, just like a no brainer. So they were looking for help. They actually ran a PC repair shop, and they were like, we don't care if you know anything about computers, but the fact that you could troubleshoot your way through that, we want to give you a shot.
Wow. That's awesome.
So that's kind of where I landed. I worked there for like 4 or 5 years. I was doing virus cleanup. It was like the FBI virus at the time, where people would come in and be like, oh, I was on Facebook and I clicked on something and now my computer says it's locked and the FBI, stole my information or something. Hopefully you remember that.
Not I.
Oh, come on. Come
I
on. Okay. Well, there's going to be people who will
I was
listen,
born
who
in
listen who remember.
1998, so
Okay. So
yeah.
maybe you don't remember that. I'm dating myself.
I'm a youngin'. Everybody's always surprised.
You'd get a pop-up on the
Yeah.
screen and the computer would be quote unquote locked, and it would tell you to go to Western Union and like wire money or something like this. That was the scam at the time.
Yeah.
And so it was a virus, whatever. It was predated ransomware, but I did a lot of that, building workstations, building servers, working on Macs. And I ended up Let's see, I had my son at the time, who was pretty young. I had my daughter right around that time, and I ended up looking for another role, which I found on Craigslist, a job posting for network coverage.
Wow.
And yeah, Craigslist. You recognize that
You know
reference?
that one. I
Okay,
do know that one. Wow.
okay. So I found the job posting on Craigslist, went in for an interview. I think I was like employee number 8 at the time. We had a tiny office in Danvers, Massachusetts. And I knew that I had potential to grow with the company. I knew the company was going places. I had no idea, the amount we would scale over the next, I've been there 11 years at this point. And I came from IT and doing that, servicing printers and ransomware came about and all that stuff into really building the cybersecurity management deliverable because it didn't exist. There weren't any MSPs at that time. This was like 2017 when NIST 800 171 came out. There weren't any MSPs that were doing incident response or SIM as a service or like any number of these controls
Sure.
within the 110. So our cybersecurity deliverable was really built to satisfy that. I was the first and only security analyst for a little bit, and then I had a couple people. We ended up growing that to a full in-house SOC with security operations, security engineering, and it was really like a reactive and versus proactive. We were doing both. We were doing the scanning, testing, fixing findings, and we were also reacting. I did a lot of incident response, a lot of calls that, of course, you don't want to get in the middle of the night and,
Yeah.
playing air traffic controller and everybody's panicking and, involving cyber liability insurance and all that fun stuff.
Right.
So that was kind of my life. And it's been really exciting. Never a dull moment, which is, I like to be challenged. I like to sort of operate on my toes. And so that was kind of where I was at until, as I mentioned, 2024, when, we sort of decided governance, risk, and compliance really needs to be its own standalone thing. It's a completely
Yeah.
separate area of expertise. So now here comes the challenge of bringing in talent, developing talent,
Yeah.
building this team, and, really supporting people on that journey, which is where I'm at today.
So you head up right now. You head up the department that's focused specifically on that. Instead of, so you've moved pretty much entirely away from all the SIMSOC, IT white service, white glove services, and all that jazz.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we still integrate to some extent with it because part of what we're doing is validating that these controls are in place and working. So there's a lot of internet connectivity between my team of analysts and consultants and our network engineers and our cloud engineers and our security engineers, et cetera. So it's all sort of one giant web.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it seems to me that a lot of people, I think the running trend for a lot of people in our industry is like that story resonates with so many because there are so many people who don't go into their career thinking, I'm going to go to college for cybersecurity and GRC so that I can help companies implement CMMC.
Yeah. I'm going to go to college for fine and performing arts and just be like an actress someday in Hollywood. But here I am, for lack of a better term, compliance person.
So was that your dream back then? What was to
Oh yeah, I was going to be on Broadway. I was going to be in Cats. Like
Cat?
I'm not joking. That was my dream. Yeah.
Can you sing?
I can. I
Sing at the
can.
bar?
No,
Yeah,
no, no, no.
you have to do that. So you don't have to do that. Oh, so you say, yeah, me and my wife, we're both musicians, and we do the music for our church, and I went to music camps and things like that, and like a school of music one summer, and yeah, so my early life was inundated with like yeah, I was going to be doing music my whole life for
Yeah.
churches and for schools and things like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's kind of same thing. It didn't pan out that way. You had to pay the bills,
That's
right?
the big
Like,
problem with that career
right,
path. Yes.
right. Yeah, musicians, unless you're big, you're either going to be a music teacher, a piano teacher, probably not going to, yeah, make enough really to be comfortable unless, you got dual income and things like that. So
Yeah. Yeah. I did try. I went
yeah.
through American Idol auditions, right? Did you
Did
ever,
you
as a
really?
singer, go to American Idol auditions? I
I did
did.
not. I did
Oh
not.
man.
I've only seen the TV episodes of really, really bad singers and really, really good, all that stuff. So
Uh,
you actually auditioned.
I did. I didn't make it to Hollywood.
Oh, well, you got to go back. You gotta try again. You can
Someday.
get Simon on your side.
Well, I'm sure there's a career someplace, or there's a second chance somewhere after all this cybersecurity stuff. And the other thing too is my daughter sings, and I would say kids these days have it easy, right? Like they have all the recording equipment right there on their laptop at their fingertips. So maybe it'll be a mother-daughter act. We'll go to American Idol audition someday together.
Is there, by any chance, a recording of your audition that we could go see?
Not I didn't even make it past the first round where I was being
Oh,
recorded. Yeah. I will tell you that scenario is tough because if you're not there, like, first person in line, they only have so many passes they can give out, right? And I was, like, there at, like, the end of the day, like, last person. I don't even think they were, like, hearing me at that point. So,
wow.
yeah.
So yeah, you sang and it was
Yeah.
just in and out.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll try again. Maybe we'll take another crack at it.
Let's get a bus of people and go together.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah. Somebody comment about that their singing. Maybe we'll have a band aside the GRC band or something.
I
That's
don't think on any webinar, podcast, anything I've done thus far, we've unpacked the American Idol audition. So this is good. We're already breaking new ground.
I think the GRC industry needs more singers. Needs
Yeah.
more singers for sure.
Yep.
So, I wanted to ask you, when you were doing the studio and audio stuff, for that, well, it was for, you were doing it in college, right? And then didn't you mentioned you had a job that you were helping in that?
Yeah. So the company I worked for made audio recording software and hardware interfaces. So I was doing customer service for them.
Did you ever aid in getting hands on with any of the equipment and stuff like that?
I did when I was in school because we had to do live recording. We had recording studios at school where we got our project
Oh,
work and we'd go
nice.
in and run our own sessions and do some recordings and stuff like that. I also had like a live a class that was focused on like live events. So we,
Oh yeah,
like studied and stuff like that. When I was at that company, I didn't get necessarily hands on, but I did get some cool gear that I would play with at home.
yeah. Do you play instruments too?
Um, not I played a few as a kid, but I would not call myself an instrument player today.
Gotcha. I was just curious because when I went to a Christian college in Pensacola, Florida for a semester, and one of the really cool things about the dorms there is they had these insulated sound insulated rooms with
Oh, that's
pianos,
cool.
and I play piano. Me and my wife both play piano. So I just remember when you mentioned having that equipment and things like that, and sound recording rooms and things like that.
Yeah.
It brought that back to memory. But yeah, I just remember loving being able to go in there and just be alone and just kind of either sing or do
Yeah.
whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah. It was really cool. Like, and I'm gonna date myself again, but like when we were younger, we sort of used to make like our own little rooms and we'd, bring a bunch of furniture in and try to dampen the sound a little bit. And then we'd record on, we'd use like Fruity Loops. Do you remember that?
Now,
No? Oh man. Oh man. You're gonna have to Google all this stuff.
I'm gonna Google it Somebody
Yeah.
Google for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, so coming out of this audio job that you were doing support work for, did you ever get a glimpse of like cybersecurity related issues there? I mean, as a support person, you're probably dealing with scams, you're probably dealing with fraud, but like, was there any touches of that?
Yeah. I mean, we did. I'll tell you another funny story. We did have an IT person at the office, and this is super embarrassing, but I think I crashed my iMac like the first day I was there.
Nice.
I don't know how. I still don't to this day, even having an expertise in IT. Don't know how I crashed my iMac, but I certainly did. And I had to get IT on day one to come up and help me get it back up and running. So, but yeah, not really. We had tech support, but I was sort of like the face being in customer service. So I would get the calls, field the calls, deal with warranty registrations and stuff like that. I did occasionally have some cool opportunities to like for live shows. Like I remember who was it? I think Gwen Stefani was playing and they like needed something like super urgently like shipped someplace for her. She was going to be in Boston or something. And it was like a late call. It was like, Bridget, can you make this happen? Like, yes, I can, of course. Anything for Gwen. Um,
Nice. Well,
yeah.
I'm just thinking like so many people, myself included, we got our start in this field with help desk, like with the user issue facing, dealing with people, learning how to deal with people, learning how to make people happy, and all those things. I think it's an objectively important like uh, phase in a person's technical career.
Yeah. Well, that's customer service, right? Like that's what help desk is. Obviously, you have to have the technical expertise, but a lot of it is customer service, being in that client facing role. And so like, pulling from customer support at the software company and even like bartending for all those years, right? Like let me hear what you're saying and, see if I can, deliver something that will help with whatever said issue is.
And that's it's not it's not just help desk at that point, because eventually the Bridget Wilsons of the world, the Stephen Walters of the world may wind up in security and maybe in some role where they need to make the boss happy, make the CEO or the CISO of the company happy. And you need to be able to not only field people's priorities and know how to triage, right? Triaging and things like that, but also deal with those. That's the most obvious thing to me after being in the field for, I mean, I'm 26 years old, so I haven't been in the field for as long as many in the field have been. But the most obvious thing to me is prioritization of tasks and time, regardless of whether you're in security or whether you're in IT or whatever it is. If you're not successful at organizing time and triaging, even if it's like one of those positions where they claim that they want you to work independently and all this stuff, you're not going to do as well as you would as if you had experience and training and the perspective of like a help desk support guy, right? Who's spending time fielding. Well, I can absolutely do no work because my PC is totally destroyed versus my Outlook's not updating or something
Right.
like yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Triaging is the word that you use that's accurate, right? Because which of these issues takes priority? There's all these different factors that go into that. Is it the CEO of a company who can't, send an email about a big deal that's closing, right? Like that's pretty important. Is it, a printer that, hardly gets used, but somebody turned it on today and they need a firmware update? Like,
Yeah. And you obviously being in the MSP space, you have those lower level techs who are, getting their hands dirty and learning a lot. And it's the prime place to fail and learn from the failure, right? I could tell you stories from my past where I made some big blunders and they were
I
like,
want to hear one. I want to hear a good one because I'll tell you a good one too after.
okay, we're trading now.
Yep,
Okay.
we're gonna
Yeah.
trade.
So I remember it was like probably our IT manager, who's the director of IT now, but he was my direct manager at the time. Actually, our founder, Ozzy Saeed, you know Ozzy,
Mhm.
he was the director of IT at the time, but he and I were not as close. He was like my boss's boss, but he was starting to spin off this IntelliGRC thing. And I was coming in for the internal IT support side of things. So my boss had tasked us with some kind of grunt work, and we were trying to find things to, uh, clean up and organize the IT room and the equipment and everything. I remember this one time we had this room filled with remote physical computers that people would, use a remote desktop gateway, a Windows server-based remote desktop gateway in the DMZ, and like RDP into these machines sitting on these shelves in this room. And I remember being like, guys, we should clean this room up and we should, organize this. This is a really messy, and there's just a lot of equipment everywhere. And I remember being told very explicitly, you cannot do anything in this room that's going to, cause any issues with people connecting, like unplugging a power supply or anything like that, which we were using a lot of UPSs at the time, right? And so I walk out of the room, and I had told the guys, yeah, let's move this shelf. I want to move this shelf. I think it's going to fit better over here. Take some initiative, try to get something done. And it was the shelf with all the PCs, and I was like, we got to be quick, but we got to be careful and all this stuff. So lo and behold, we pulled the whole thing right out of the wall. And all these users lost access, and they were blowing up our manager. And he's like, "What are you guys doing?
What's going on in there?"
What is going on?" After he specifically told us not to. Told us not to do anything that would cause issues. And so it wasn't like we meant to disobey or anything like that, but it was like straight up that he warned us not to do. So that was a huge, like head in your hands type of day. One of those days you go home and you're like, am I going to have a job tomorrow? Because all these people were so upset. It's looking back, it's hilarious, but that's one of those moments where, as a low level guy who's just trying to learn what PC parts are and how to help customers and help internal people and support people, but also learn the technical acumen and just all those things that you look back on and you think of as simple things. It was one of those extremely valuable learning moments for me.
I bet you'll never ever make that mistake again.
I mean, knowing me, I probably would. I mean, I'm accident prone. The guy here will tell you I'm accident prone and somewhat over dramatic. So, okay, I told you a story. Now tell me one.
Okay, so the one I was thinking of, everybody at I shouldn't say everybody. There were many years where the founder and president of our company would so wonderfully bring this up and retell the story in our company meetings, and I was so appreciative of that. I'm like, can we just stop talking about this now? We keep rehashing it like every year for all these new hires to know how bad I screwed up. I think I was like an IT level 2, and I went out because I had a client who needed a power supply in a Dell ESXi host.
Yeah.
And there was a backup power supply, so it was like a no-brainer. It was like, we're just swapping out a power supply. There's 2 there, no big deal. Get the part from Dell, schedule time to go out. Client knew I was coming. It was the middle of the day. Everybody was working. I was told it was hot swappable. All right.
You were told.
You know where this is going. So in theory, it should have been hot swappable. But I guess, what we learned out of this was, right, like, plan for the worst. You want to plan for worst case scenario. So worst case scenario happened. Dell had sent me the wrong part. So I plugged it in, it fit, but all of a sudden, entire server infrastructure went down. It was right in the middle of the day, right after I told everybody, hey, I'm just going to pop this in. You don't have to do anything. You're good to go. Like, no impact to your workday. Server went down. It had their Exchange server on there, so email. It had a number of other VMs, estimating servers, like their files. Entire file system was on there. Everything was down. And I was right in the middle of the office. There was no server closet. So everybody was like, what happened? Sweating, face getting really red. Power it back up.
Those are the
Please,
best.
please let it come back up. Sure as heck didn't. And it went into a disk check for the physical volumes, which of course, I had VMs living on those physical
Yeah.
volumes.
Right.
Just going to be a few minutes, everybody. Don't worry about it. And just it ended up, we weren't able to. I'm calling my level 3s now for support, going, oh my God, what do I do? This is scanning the C drive. Like, please God help me. So of course it didn't come up. The Exchange, I think it was an Exchange 2010 server disk was completely corrupt.
Oh,
Yeah, so they were down. They didn't have email for a couple days. We ended up having to restore from I forget exactly the dynamics of it, but we got them back up and running temporarily on a cloud Exchange server, but they didn't have any of their historical data. And then once we got the server rebuilt, we had to bring everything back down and try to merge it. So it was a whole mess.
wow.
It was a whole disaster, all because I didn't say, hey, I need an hour. I'm going to shut this down. Everybody go to lunch and do it the right way. I thought I could just, and that didn't work.
So you were doing field technician work as well?
Yeah. That's what I came up on the IT side. So I went through, at that point, I think I was IT level 2. I don't think I ended up as a project engineer, and then I was a systems engineer for a little bit. So I was actually building out, I would build out new offices, networking, order the parts, get them up and running. I was building servers, doing server migrations, doing some, I would say, replacing firewalls, like light networking stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
Dealing with switching and all that fun stuff too.
That is one area of experience that I kind of blew past. Like that, and it's one area that I feel like I've gotten that experience from having to visit offices and do things for clients, but I learned it later than I probably should have. But that was one thing. Like at IntelliGRC, we do a lot of, like, most of the work that we do are through meetings and document building. If we have to remote in, they'll issue us a laptop, those types of things. But I remember, like, there have been a couple clients where, going on site, just the sheer pressure that I felt being on site physically in front of this person and saying, yeah, can I get a baseline of your firewall? Because I don't want to, I want to make sure we get the right things or whatever. And we open up the, or let me look at your physical, box and your physical, like your doors, making sure that what you say in your SSP aligns, like kind of doing mini type, not audits, but like verification and things like that. Like the pressure that comes with being able to, one, be confident in saying that, this is what you need, but doing it right there in front of them.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, like, it's one thing to say it over an email or say it over a Teams meeting, but I can't imagine taking down somebody's network right there, everybody
right in front of them.
I chuckle because I was telling somebody this the other day that the most, I was telling somebody just the other day who I was having lunch with, the most significant moments, I think, in what grew me as a man, what grew me in my career, but also personally, were those moments where you did something or made some mistake or you did something wrong or whatever the case may be that made you, what you mentioned, made you blush, made you, your face turn red and all eyes were on you. Those are the most significant life lessons that in my opinion, that I've ever had, is those ones where you did wrong or you royally messed up, and the consequence involved like shame, like actual shame.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's like the fight or flight too. And I think the more of those that you have, you learn how your body responds and you can grow from that, to your point. Like there's a lot to be learned when it's like, okay, you start to panic, but can you pause? Can you take a moment? Can you think about what the next logical step might be? Or are
Yeah.
you just going to take off and be like, I'm out, like, I can't handle this, you know?
And then you have you have to lay your head on your pillow that night. And those introspective moments where, one of the things that, and I hope that I've been able to maintain this, and I know I've failed numerous times in this, but one of the things that's crucial in any industry, especially industries where you have like exponential opportunity to grow in your titles and positions into like leadership and things like that, is it's very easy in this industry to become arrogant and to become a know-it-all, and to be willing to look at somebody who is obviously wrong about something and be really negative and have a arrogant disposition towards them. And those are the moments that keep you humble. Like those are the moments that say, man, I am limited and I have to learn from this, and this is going to happen again. Like I'm going to have these moments again. And instead of, like you said, run from them, obviously it's going to hurt. But, for anybody who's listening, especially newer people in the industry or younger people that are learning or in college or entry level roles, you're going to fail, and you're going to have moments where your face is going to blush and you're going to wish that you had never been born.
Yep.
But you need those. And
Yeah, because those are the moments that make you a better leader. Because to your point, right? Like it's easy to be arrogant. There are plenty of people out there who will, sort of make people feel this big if they were like quote unquote wrong about something, but we need to remember like all the times we were in that position. Like I told you, I was on the phone with my T3 going, please God help me. I don't know what to do. And that's the leader that I wanted to be, So that always sort of stuck with me. And now, I won't say I'm on the other side of it because hopefully I still have a little ways to go in my career. But, I'm kind of at the point where I've been able to, be on the other end, be the person who, somebody called when they were panicking. And I remembered, okay, calm, cool, and collected, wiser heads prevail. And, you can't forget how it felt in that moment.
Oh man. And it breeds such empathy for people, and I love all the amount of content in this industry. And I'm not saying this to try to promote this by any means, but one thing that needs to be had more than, I don't want to say more than competency, because competency is incredibly important in this field. Like if you're not competent, you don't know what you're talking about, you could really hurt some people's businesses. But just as important as that is being able to empathize with people who are trying to sincerely learn this stuff and do it well, who are going to fail, objectively are going to fail. Like, what we were just talking about, but there are countless examples of cybersecurity and people who are trying to learn GRC, who are being entrusted, say, by, the random guy, for example, from accounting, who in this small 5-man shop, who is a DIB OSC, who's been tasked with getting their company ready for CMMC and get ready for an assessment, who has, some IT experience because he's been that guy who is kind of technical and he knows how to fix some computers here and there, but is the one this is the weight of the world is thrown on his shoulders. It breeds such empathy to know that person is going to make mistakes, especially if you're a consultant, an MSP. You're going to be working with somebody who is trying to learn this stuff, and if you're not humble, you're going to push them away. You're going to make them shell up. We have a client right now who we've had a client where they had worked with several service providers that had no clue how to help them, and that made the client really resistant to things we said, to things other good service providers said to them. And thankfully we kind of broke through that and were able to make a lot of really good progress. But the thing is, like, arrogance, lack of empathy, all these different things, they cause harm, not just to individual OSCs, but to your MSP practice or to your consultancy practice, because at the end of the day, these people not just need to know that you're competent. Like Bridget is competent, but they also need to know that Bridget has failed and knows what it's like to fail and can empathize with that too.
Yeah, 100%. That's a lot of my day-to-day is having conversations with OSCs and people who are exactly in that role, right? Like, I've been tasked with this. I didn't go through training. I don't know anything about it. My company is expecting me to get it done, but I have 5 other jobs that take priority over this. So a lot of what I do is listening in these initial calls, right? Because I want to know what brought you here to this conversation and what you have been through up to this point, so that we're not like repeating some of the past work that's already been done. We're not trying to completely reinvent the wheel. Like, do you want help where you're at today, current state, and keeping this as low budget as possible, bare minimum viability? Do you want to start from scratch because you'd rather have a clean environment? Like, I want to know everything about what historically has brought you to this point, and like listening and, empathizing and understanding where you're at. It can't just be like a pre-canned all-in-one solution. That's not going to fit. I mean, there are a few that it'll fit for sure, but most OSCs, that's not going to be a fit. It's got to be something that, can be budgeted for, can be planned, can allow them to stay in the running, bidding on these contracts without putting themselves out of business, trying to, invent a solution, implement a solution where they've got to spend more than they're going to be awarded on the contract.
Well, that is probably some of the wisest perspective on that particular issue. And we say the same thing. We have to. We would not be in good conscience, saying anything else. Is we've actually had clients who we engaged with us, signed contracts with us, and COVID hits, and they realize, the 5% of my revenue stream that comes from the DoD, like contracts I have with the DoD, it's not worth the cost of implementing CMMC. We all want to say that CMMC, hypothetically, because of DFAR 7012, has kind of been, the requirements have been required since 2016, 2017, even earlier than that, 2013, for some memos, right? But that may be true, that specific 800-171 requirements were required. But I was just talking with somebody else the other day about this. They not everything that we know today, and all the heavy lifting and all the scoping nuances and the assessment objectives and just all the nuances that come with where we're at today versus where we were back when that initial kickoff of those requirements being required. It's a totally different place. And I get it. Some companies, and maybe many companies, totally threw this under the rug and did nothing about it. But our empathy has to come in when we say, guys, the OSC hearing about this DFAR 7012 clause in their contracts and trying to figure this out they're not in the same place that they are 7 years later, 8 years later, where they're seeing how 800-171 applies to CRMAs, how does VDI work, what do the three C3POs think about all these things? What does DIBCAC think about all these things? Like, in the various perspectives, what types are NFO controls required? Are they not? Like, all these different things that OSCs have been tossed to and fro throughout the last 8 years, right, is now coming to a point where it's understandable when many of them are struggling to be confident that if Bridget comes in and tells me this is what we need to do, are you sure that's not going to change again, Bridget? Like,
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And to be fair, a lot of the OSCs who did something way back when, now what they needed to have done is totally different. So, like, for example, the 320 objectives, right? Like, even the OSCs who did something mapped 110 requirements, they didn't map 320 objectives. So that makes it even trickier. And these are conversations I have too, because we certainly have clients that we've supported from 800 171, and now getting them ready for audit. Well, we need to spend a little bit more time here in getting everything converted and up to date for today, because things have just continuously changed. So that's, there was no wrong. There's no, you did this incorrectly because it's not compliant for today. Nobody knew what we didn't know at the time, and we did the best we could.
Right. I totally agree. And one thing, you can make an argument that 2020 comes around with the interim rule, and we have a bit more clarity. We have the assessment guide, we have the DoD assessment methodology in the 7019, 7020, and we have obviously NIST 800-171 alpha. We have much more clarity, but in the realm of, because I'm speaking as somebody who works with, you're the same. You're speaking with people who have long-term relationships with organizations trying to do this. 5 years, when there's not intended true focus, or they don't have somebody on staff that is dedicated to compliance, that can be that liaison and be that person who their primary role is working to get things done, and they're more focused on paying the bills and making sure that the servers keep running, and that when an incident happens, they respond. Like, all these event-based priorities, it's kind of not out of the realm of like what's understandable, that many are still making progress and still working, and some in their very early stages of implementation after 5 years of that clarity. But it's certainly not like we've had all the details we need to do everything we were supposed to back from 2016. Like, I really empathize with many of these clients who, they're small mom and pop shops who have been told, and I've heard this, have been told by their contracting officers that they don't need to do anything about this. This is a one-off thing. And then come to find out, that's absurd.
Right.
And then they're scrambling to figure out what to do because they have the final rule and we have the 48 CFR on the way.
Yeah. And even, when we get as granular as tooling, we even up until, we didn't have clarity on whether FedRAMP was going to be required, specific to ESPs, right? We had this new term ESP that was a CMMC acronym, but there wasn't clarity around if it's a CSP versus an MSP. And then when it comes down to tooling, where does the tool need to be in the FedRAMP marketplace? Do all of our security tools need to be FedRAMPed? And it wasn't until very recently, October 16th, where we found out that's not necessarily the case. If there's only security protection data, then we only have to align with 800-171. We don't necessarily need that CSP to be FedRAMPed. So that was one that was sort of a welcome twist. But any OSCs who had, any OSCs who had spent money and budget and landed on tools that were FedRAMPed, maybe got a little bit burned.
Yeah.
Not that it was a bad investment, but I will say also with that, having gone through, over the course of the last few years, building our deliverable, which included all the tooling, making sure that those tools could be validated against 800-171. There wasn't a lot out there for security
Perfect.
tools that were actually FedRAMPed anyways. So
It's
that was the big
still not
challenge
really
too.
that many
Yeah.
options.
Yeah. And nobody wanted to sort of like take that plunge into becoming FedRAMPed. They didn't know if it was a worthwhile investment because the ruling wasn't finalized yet. So those who sort of held off from the vendor relationships that I personally have, I know there were some that were like, we're tracking it. We're going to see what happens before we take the plunge to get FedRAMPed. And, it ended up working out for them where they didn't necessarily need to be because they were housing SPD and that's it.
Sure.
But yeah, there wasn't a lot, and there still is not today a lot in the FedRAMP marketplace.
Yeah. And, I still really strongly advocate for using FedRAMP, even if they're a security protection asset.
Mm-hmm.
Still strongly recommended, because where are you going to find a cloud service provider that's not FedRAMP that has a customer responsibility matrix?
Yep.
That I'm sure, we haven't even gotten into that and the tools that you guys use. And, let's get into that in a minute. But, over here at IntelliGRC, a lot of our customers were working with doing things from point A to Z, is, from scoping, enumerating all their assets, scoping, doing risk assessments, all these different things, trying to determine if they're going to, like you said, spin up a whole new environment because to make it clean and efficient, or try to reform their current infrastructure. And some of these companies have bajillions of cloud service providers, and some of them are crucial to their business operations. Mm-hmm. Some of them would fall into that category of security protection asset because they perform a security function. They satisfy one of the 800-171 requirements for the company, or provide some other security function, or they have security protection data like log data. And none of them have any clue when you ask them. It's going to be a long shot, Joe from customer that I'm supporting, but can you ask that CSP if they have a CRM that supports either 853 or 800-171 so that we can at least try to map it somewhat? Mm-hmm. And it's like 99% of the time they're like, I have no clue what you're talking about.
That's the dreaded conversation.
Yeah.
Oh man, so much of my 2024 was having those conversations with vendors and partners. And you always start talking to a sales rep and they're going to tell you what you want to hear. So it's like, of course we're compliant with CMMC. And I'm like, well, that's can't be true because that doesn't even exist yet.
They're compliant.
So, right. But yeah, it's a lot of, that's another thing that we do on behalf of our customers, like sort of as our vCISO engagement, is this vendor due diligence. So yes, we're really good now at getting like to the correct people within the company who can answer the questions, who know what the heck we're talking about. And, we can let our client know if there's any red flags with the solution where we feel like it might not be something that they can pass audit with.